Hello and welcome to the Turn 4 podcast. I am your host, Dan Maldonado. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. This podcast comes from two lifelong fans of IndyCar and other forms of motorsports. Before we get on with it, got to introduce my co-host, Tim Reiner. Hey, Timmy.
Hello, Dan.
Tim, you're not just the co-host today. You're the show producer today.
I did all the notes today. Wow.
Yes, you did.
Takes
It's not hard to get
time,
to 4 pages, is it?
Nah, it's not hard at all. There's a lot of action, a lot of things going on. So, you just kind of start typing away and it just flows. It just comes together. So we'll see. I guess we'll have to hear from the listeners to see if it was a good show or a bad show.
If it was worthwhile. Hey, real quick, while you were typing this, one of the first things that you would have typed would have been the Bommarito Automotive Group 500. Why is it the 500?
It's got to be kilometers, I'm assuming.
Can't be. It's 310 miles.
No.
Is that what they're at? 260 laps or whatever? Maybe that's
260 laps. Isn't that
Is it
right?
a mile and a half?
I don't really know. Is it?
Put you on the spot. I love it. It's all right. Let's do some quick meathead math.
It's
260 plus another half, 130.
Well, 62 miles
gets us at 390, I guess. Well, a little over, but oh well. Somebody will tell us.
Yeah. I think it's got to be kilometers, right? I don't know. I don't have my calculator.
Because I love irony. Like, we always point out the irony of Hy-Vee giving away a Corvette when they sponsor a Honda team. I looked up just for the fun of it to see if Bommarito Automotive Group had a Chevy or Honda franchise. And they do. They've got a ton. Probably be easier to just name off what they don't have. So, anywho, good job on the notes, Tim. We got a great show ahead. I think it was a pretty good race. It was a pretty good race.
It wasn't bad.
Thank God for all the crazy weather happening. So it got cooler and, it wasn't 110 degrees. Crowd looked good. Crowd looked real good.
Okay.
I don't know what that means.
It's not great.
What does that mean? How are you going to fill? So how are you going to fill the stands?
I don't know.
IndyCar in an oval. It's not the draw, Milwaukee fans. It's not the draw.
Well, there's more
other than the 500
we got to add. Everybody says so.
Yeah.
What is the draw?
Concerts.
Because
in the absence of concert, I think the crowd looked pretty good in St. Louis. I really do. I think for an IndyCar race, I think the crowd looked pretty good. I think the crowd looked good because the weather was mild. And if this race is going to happen during the day, which IndyCar seems insistent on doing to, get it on network TV, then, you take your chance with the crowd, I guess. But the crowd looked pretty good, I thought.
I guess. I was looking at turn 2. There was no one in the stands.
That's not where they were. They were all sitting along the front stretch.
I know.
Nice concentration of people.
You watch
it looks worse. This is why they don't race
at
MIS anymore, right? Because, they would sprinkle people all over MIS, so across, 2 miles, and it'd be like, or half the track or whatever, and it's like, oh, there's nobody there.
Well,
it's like, well, there's 45,000 people here, but they're all over the place.
It used to be full, completely full.
Oh, yeah.
Like the Nazareth back in the day, that used to be completely full, too.
Yep. It's not the draw.
Changed. There was a split or something that happened that, kind of changed everything. And they were still trying to crawl back. But, I think viewership on TV has been the highest it's been in years. So
it's all that matters. That's where the money is.
Yeah, I guess. I think it matters if people are in the seats, though. That matters.
Oh, I agree. I thought it was pretty good. You're the one that says it wasn't. I thought it was pretty good.
I don't think it was. Yeah. I don't want to see full grandstands.
Agree to disagree. Agree that I'm right, as usual. Got to kick it off.
Talk about your shirt.
No.
We can't talk about your
shirt.
Is
a message.
Oh, Lord.
And I've crossed out all those sections toward the end of this thing on the grid wall. Let's talk about Scott McLaughlin earning his second pole in the last 3 races, first on an oval.
Mm-hmm.
He got a 9-place grid penalty because he had to go for an engine change. So that elevated Joseph Newgarden to the pole position, followed by Herta and a couple of Aero McLarens on the second row with Award and Rosenquist. Pillow also had a grid penalty. So Scott's 5th career pole in IndyCar. Pretty good, Tim. I know he puts a lot of emphasis on these ovals, and I think the pole is obviously a nice first step, but you gotta finish this thing off. I just don't know that he had the race car to finish this off.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the track a little bit and trying to pass. I think it's hard to get around people. And at times you're trying to save your tires, you're trying to save some fuel. And so to make a pass is hard. And I think the other thing that really comes up is, you get the 9 place grid penalty, you start 10th. So you're 10th and then you're trying to move through the field. The other thing is the marbles are really, really, there's a lot. It's
Yeah,
you can
I
see
know.
it easily on camera. So as soon as the marbles build up, you're kind of in a
Follow
position
the
that
leader
how
kind of
far do
thing.
you go
Yeah.
outside the racing line in order to make a pass? So there was passing, right? But it's not to the extent that you would hope. It's not a 2, 3 lane course. It might be a 2 lane, 1.5, call it. But at the end of the day, until the sweepers come through and sweep, it's hard to make passes. So you got to do it early, you got to do it fast, and you got to do it after yellows when they actually sweep the track.
Right. The grid penalties because of the engine change. It's interesting to see that these are happening now, and the reason for the grid penalty is because they've gone through their allotment of engines for the season already. So this is a strategic move, maybe on the part of Honda or on the part of some of these teams. I mean, you have McLaughlin, Dixon, Sato, Kirkwood, Canapino, and then eventually Palou, um, all issuing with these penalties for engine changes. If you want to see the full rule analysis of why this happens and what's at it, you can check out IndyCar1909.com for more information there. The only thing I'll say is just what I just said is they've already gone through their allotment. There has to be a reason why Honda and Chevy both are strategically accepting the fact that they're not going to earn points on those particular engines because of the fifth of the season. So, and it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty tight. So it's a matter of a handful of points coming down here to the end between Honda and Chevy. So
Yeah, and maybe do
for
that on an oval just because it's easier to pass than it is
yeah,
on some of these, road circuits that are coming up. So
yep,
I guess if you feel like you got to do it, I'm sure you're looking at the engine mapping, what's going on, and the wear and tear on the engine. And at some point, you got to go, all right, we've got to change these out, and
mhm,
now's the time, and we'll, finish this race and then the last two with the same engine. So, um, interesting. A lot of normally stuff we don't see, but
right,
something we saw an abundance of here uh, at Gateway. So yeah.
right. Um, Erickson, I know, mentioned something about the engine wasn't pulling in during his qualifying run. Could be a draggy car too, because I mean they wheeled out a backup that was sort of wrapped for Palou's backup, and they
Mm-hmm.
put they did the best they could to make that car the 8, but it ended up being kind of the 10X car or the 10B car because
Mm-hmm.
it was the
10T.
American
Remember the
Legion
days of
10T.
they were
Yeah, that's
T.
it.
Yeah.
That's what I was searching for. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so he was out there with that, but he did say that he was the car was dragging a little bit. It wasn't pulling at the same rate. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
change the engine, so obviously didn't see anything happening there.
Wonder how that
As
works from a sponsorship perspective. Like, do you got to give some
Yeah,
money back to Husky after not
yeah,
doing their livery? I don't know how that
yeah.
works.
That's a great question. I thought about that as well. I wonder if it's just a minimum number of races that Husky has to be, full livery on those cars, and maybe there's some fluff there that Ganassi already has, so they've achieved the minimum number, or they know they're going to achieve the minimum number, so they were not that worried about it at that
Mm-hmm.
point. But you're right. That's a great question because I thought about that as well. In thinking about qualifying, we had gotten the news going into Gateway this race weekend that Penske and Foyt are forming a technical alliance, and there's a lot of details to this, and I'm sure you can again find this at IndyCar1909.com. But it sounds like it's going to be kind of a development program, development not just for young
Mm-hmm.
drivers, but for young engineers and technicians and anybody that wants to get involved in the sport. And it sounds like Penske will help place those and help bring those along, and in return for that, they're going to provide technical support to the AJ Foyt Racing Team. Which, man, I've been saying that for a long time. I don't know why they hadn't hooked up with somebody earlier. I've also been saying the same thing about Juncos. It would not surprise me to see Juncos, get a technical alliance with McLaren or
Mm-hmm.
another Chevy team out there, because I think some of these smaller teams, it just doesn't make sense to keep putting that in there like that, and it's just better to go tried and true. Hasn't really paid off for Shank this year, but that could be a lot of different things playing into that. But nonetheless, with this Foyt link up with Penske, kind of had higher expectations. I mean, we knew that Santucci was fast in qualifying, but kind of maybe overshot it a little bit. Had a big
Yep.
moment I didn't see, and then that kind of relegated him to the back. His teammate, of course, didn't finish the race, but that we can talk about that in a minute. But I don't know. I didn't see it. Did you have higher expectations, Tim, or is this about what you thought?
Well, I think from a qualification, I think we expected them to be a little further up. I expected Santino to be further up, but it sounds like he had some bobble in the second lap, so it sort of destroyed that. But at the end of the day, he had a good race. He came up through the field, but again, it's when you're starting that far back, 22nd, whatever it was, coming through the field, and then you finished fairly good. So yeah, I expected a little more, but at the same time, it's been a week or whatever it's been, so it's not been that long for them to really sort of put it together. So I'm expecting a little more as obviously the season goes on and then into next season. But yeah, started 26, sorry, and then actually finished 13th for Santino. So
Not bad. Yeah.
no, not bad.
Interesting strategy race. Strategy was all over the place, so it could be a
Yeah.
little bit of that as well.
Yep.
Um, Maybe a big surprise here with how well Andretti did in this qualifying. Um, maybe they got it figured out on ovals. Maybe it could be that Gateway you kind of drive like a street course. I mean, there seems to be heavy braking, a lot of shifting, and the big wings on those cars. So could be a little bit of that Andretti just has found that street course setup for sure, and they could just be leaning on some of that development to help carry their way through to Gateway. So Herta started second. He qualified third, but with the penalties, he was moved up there. Um, we'll see. I mean, they were a powerhouse at one point on these short ovals, and maybe they're getting it turned around.
Yeah, and to me, it seemed like Herta was the only one that got it right in qualifying. You had Grosjean that qualified ninth, so nothing crazy on that. But
It's not bad for him though. It's really
yeah, I
not.
guess it's not bad. And then with all the penalties, he moved up to fourth or whatever it was
Mhm.
for fifth, sixth, whatever it was. I think it was fifth. But anyways, but then he fell back, right? It was one of those things. So as soon as the green flag went, he sort of fell back. So I don't think Andretti's figured it out. I think it was just kind of like, wow, something happened with Herta and they were able to make it happen. But I think you take that and you would put it like through all four cars if you sort of figure it out. So I don't think they have, but I think it was just kind of a little surprise and a little feather in their cap to be starting second, even though they qualified third.
I think that even if they did figure it out, there's no guarantee that all four cars would be good. You got to be able to drive it. So just because the setup is perfect doesn't mean that everybody's going to have a perfect race. You still
Yeah,
got to
but
drive it.
yeah, no, I agree. But you got a lot of people that had two or three cars up there, at least a couple up front. You've got
The
in the
usuals.
Fast Six, you'd have two Arrows. You've got one Ganassi, and then you got two Penske's, and obviously the one Andretti. So,
Yeah,
they're mixing it, which is good.
that is good. Moving on to the race, Dixon does Dixon. Nobody does Dixon better than Dixon, but we can
Yeah,
talk about that.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
let's so let's talk about the oval specialists that were involved in this race. Today's producer suggests that maybe we rethink some of the oval only drivers out there. So in this particular case, we're talking about Ed Carpenter and Takuma Sato. But
Yeah,
today's producer also wants to set aside that rule for the Indy 500. Think it's okay. Frankly, if you're going to do that rule, I think that rule should go to the 500 first because it's the longest, it's the fastest, it's the most
it
dangerous,
is.
right? So if you're going to have that rule, you might as well have it there, which then robs Elio Castroneves of an opportunity to be, a five-time Indy 500 champion. But talk to me about this, Tim.
Yeah, it just seemed really odd, and it seems like it not odd. It seems pretty consistent that the oval only drivers are running into issues often when it comes to the race. And I don't know if it's just lack of practice. I don't know if it's just I've got my one shot here to do something, and then this is the end of the season. But you got Ed rear-ending Peterson at the beginning, and then you've got Sato, who was all over the place all day long, and then eventually just hit the wall and caused a yellow. So it just
Let me
makes me
stop you right
think
there.
that
My
is it
favorite
really worth it?
part, I listened to the first part of this race on the radio, and then I watched it on TV after. But my first part of the radio broadcast was Davey Hamilton saying when Sato crashed, he said, "Oh, Takuma Sato, he's been trying to crash all afternoon."
He
And
had.
it was the funniest thing. But you're absolutely right. Sato had a miserable race, and it was, it kind of came to a merciful end when he finally did hit the wall and took himself out. But
He was up in the marbles all day long, just
all day
driving
long
around on
and
the high
trying to crash
bank and
himself.
trying
Yep.
to, yeah, trying to
Yep.
crash. And then you have Ed on the opening lap hit Peterson. And then
Yeah.
from there, he's got a stop and go penalty, which is actually stop and 30-second hold. You're 3 laps down on lap 2 or 3 of the race. Like, why even be out there?
Why even
That's,
be out there?
yeah, doesn't make any sense to me.
Um, Sato crashed out of 2 races this season as an Indy specialist. I believe it was 2 as an oval specialist. Texas, he finished 28th. St. Louis, we just mentioned, he finished 26th. At the Speedway, at the 500, he finished 7th. Iowa race 1, he finished 9th. Iowa race 2, he finished 25th. He might have had contact there. I don't remember. And I was looking at it on my iPad, and just for anybody at IndyCar that's listening, you can't change the results segments on an iPad because the pop-up screen or whatever, it doesn't even recognize the pop-up. But that's neither here nor there. Ed Carpenter, on the other hand, Timmy, Texas 13th, IMS 20, Iowa 1 24, Iowa 2 23rd, St. Louis 24th.
Why be out there?
Maybe it's Ed Carpenter that we need to be talking about, not necessarily Sato-san.
Well, the 7th at Indy is my whole reason that, you can still do it at Indy. I think you want to have a 33 car field, but every place else,
9th, Iowa 1.
I guess it's a top 10. So,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it is Ed. I don't know. It just seems to be they're never in the hunt to win. It doesn't really mix it up from
Yeah.
a racing perspective. They seem to be in the way. And so I just after this race, I'm like, why even be in the race? Doesn't make any sense to me.
I think there's a little bit of merit to what you're saying. Not saying there should be a rule,
Just a little bit.
but I think the merit to what you're saying is for the full timers who are race conditioned, right? To pop into these cars, drive at 200 miles an hour, regardless of the track, are race conditioned. It's hard for, when's the last time Ed Carpenter ran, right? It was Iowa. It was a month ago or whenever it was. So, and then he's not necessarily, I'm sure he's in wonderful physical condition, better than both you and I combined. But I think to say that he's in wonderful physical condition versus race condition to go race on an oval,
different things.
2 very different things. So I think that's where the merit lies in that. I think that's where the merit lies in Sato as well. I don't know how much time these guys are getting in a simulator. I don't know how, I've never been in one of those. I would pay real money to be in one, but I don't know how applicable it is to, the racecraft and being, race ready. So that's the merit I see in what you're saying, but I wouldn't take Sato out of there. Sato's exciting. I think, these marbles with this alternate tire and blah, 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 I think is kind of where we're at with that.
So I heard you'd leave Sato and take Ed out. That's what I heard.
That's what I heard. And that's what I said. You heard me right. So yeah.
So it did have merit. It just seemed like they were in the way the whole day and just causing havoc. I mean, why be out there?
More times than not, when Scott Dixon wins a race, I think strategy is kind of not too far behind. Am I right? He doesn't necessarily go out there and dominate. A lot of times it's just racecraft.
He used to, but yeah, as of late, it's been on strategy for sure.
You're gonna pitch differently as you get older, right? Can't rely on the fastball the same way.
I agree. You got to do something different.
Yeah. So I think that's where, Mike Hall and Scott Dixon are playing this strategy piece, and they played it right. I mean, they played it right. It was
Wow.
so crazy. Pit 3 times. Everybody else pit 5. Let's say most people
Yeah,
pit 4 or
most
5
most
times,
everybody.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
not 3. And he had to get 65 laps per run to make that distance and make it work. Qualified 7th, started 16th, finished first.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Genius.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It was
Genius.
it was
Yep.
so awesome. It was so good to see. I think the announcers were looking for it sooner than they were the last race.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it kind of came to the forefront that, you know what, this is going to happen. This could happen. And then it was,
It
yeah,
happened.
full on.
Mhm.
He leads the most laps for sure out there. And so 123 he led. And so from that perspective, he was a force to be reckoned with. And it comes down to him and Mike Hall understanding what to do. And I think it comes down to, how do you, play that strategy out? I don't know if there's that many people that can do it. You've got to have Scott Dixon behind the wheel, and you got to have a Honda.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me let me say this. I almost feel like Honda this year might have a super special map, a fuel save map that might sort of exceed whatever it is that Chevy's been able to do on their fuel saving map, because the the amount of fuel that Dixon was able to save here, was able to save at IMS,
Amazing.
is unreal,
I
right?
don't.
And we know he's good at that. We know that Power is good at that, but Power hasn't been
They had to
that good.
bail. Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
had to
I
bail on
think.
that straight. Power pit with 13 to go. He
Hmm.
couldn't he couldn't get there, couldn't get anywhere near there. Nobody else in the Chevys were able to get there. So it kind of makes me feel like Honda might have struck on something this season and they're taking advantage of it. And I think the person best suited to really take advantage of it is Scott Dixon.
Hmm.
Because we knew that a
Nice.
few races ago, where Pillow, they were asking Pillow to save. He ended up finishing this thing lucky. I can't even remember what it is.
Oh,
He
is
was
that where they were?
clutching, right, to
Yeah, and
save
then
fuel, and yeah.
there
So
was a yellow that saved him, which
yeah, the
kept
yellow
him
that saved him.
up there in the top a few spots, which I think he won, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so he was doing that, but yeah, Honda's figured something out, or I'm convinced Scott Dixon has very, very long fuel lines in that car, and they're somehow,
I
going around and
love the
around.
cheating aspect of it. I was going with the technical aspect of it.
Well,
Yeah,
I thought about it, but obviously that's not happening. There's no way that's happening, but they figured it out and they played this race like they should and came out, on top. Again, two less pit stops than most everybody else that finished up front there.
yeah. It's amazing.
It is
Unreal.
amazing.
Yeah, unreal. Perfect amount of fuel save, the lift and coast, traffic, which gives you a little bit, right? A little bit of a pull there. There was one
Mm-hmm.
point there toward the end of this race where Kirkwood was unlapping himself, and it was almost like Dixon threw it in reverse going into the turn because
Oh
Kirkwood
yeah,
went
he's
around
like,
him
go
so
on.
fast,
Mm-hmm.
to get his lap back. And it was like, that was alarming because it almost made me feel like maybe there's something wrong with Dixie, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
gave up on him or whatever. But it was interesting to see how that worked out.
And then
For
near the end, he
Ganassi,
lets Malukas go, right?
yeah, why not? Hey,
Mm-hmm.
he's not racing Malukas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you do what you can. Tuck into the draft. You're gonna get a couple of tenths here and there, and
Yeah.
it all goes into the bank.
And then he
So
has enough left to keep her at bay. And then
mhm.
you got a line of cars behind that, and no one can get around him. So there was a long train behind him, but
Yeah,
the second place car was still a long ways back.
yeah, a little luck too, because nobody was really doing anything foolish because those marbles were a problem.
Mm-hmm. They
The
were
marbles were a
a big
problem.
problem.
Chip Ganassi Racing, Scotty wins. Pelot 7th, did exactly what he needed to do. Ericsson 10th in the Frankenstein car, and the aforementioned Sad Hassan 26th.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about Pelot, he just does what he needs to do, right, to secure this championship. No more, no less. I think he knows his weakness, if you want to call it that. Do you want to call it that? Can you call it a weakness on ovals?
I don't know if you can, but and I don't think you can. I don't think he has a weakness,
I
honestly.
think
If
it's
you
the
had to pick
one.
something, that
Yeah,
is the one thing you'd
that
have
would
to
be it.
pick. But at
Yeah,
the end of the day, he's not terrible.
right. Started 14th, qualified fifth, but he had the problems there. Stayed out of trouble all day, and he could have gotten in trouble coming through that field, as we know, right? Um, which is good for him. So he's going to do what he needed to do in the championship. He's going to get back at it in
Yeah.
Portland and Laguna, where he made everybody look silly last year. So be on the lookout.
Yeah.
It's
I don't
important.
think you can call it a weakness. Texas third, Indy fourth, Iowa eighth. That's one. Iowa two, third. And then he finishes off Portland here
Yeah, yeah.
in seventh. So
Erickson goes into a backup car. He does well. Um, Pit issue with the tire. He was essentially on the same strategy that Dixon was on. If it had not been for this pit problem, I would have loved to see if Marcus could match or at least get close to what Dixon was doing on track,
mhm.
and be able to bring that strategy to his own team as well. It would have been interesting. Um, Newgarden starts first because of McLaughlin's engine penalty. Looks pretty good in the beginning of this thing, and looking to sweep the ovals, which is as tight as IndyCar racing is. To think that Joseph Newgarden would sweep all these oval races um, is just unbelievable. Led 98 laps, second only to Dixon's 123. Um, loses some spot. There's some pit sequencing going on here. That's a tough word for me to say. Um, little aggressive, trying to play catch up. Did they think or did they know they were throwing this like they were going to lose this race? So was he trying to make more than what he could? He wasn't just taking what was available to him.
That's how I see it. I
Yeah.
see it that they had a good idea that Dixon was going to make it all the way to the end, and they weren't going to win the race, and so Newgarden was going all out to try to catch him.
Yeah. And
You
like I
basically
said,
throw it away.
yeah, he
You
was
throw away.
chasing and he was behind DeFrancesco,
Yeah,
right? So he was chasing DeFrancesco, probably not, well, we know it now in hindsight, right? Not the smartest thing. I think it wasn't, obviously he threw it away and he's now gonna finish second or third. And based on how Dixon is coming alive right now, third is looking like a very real possibility for Newgarden. And we're gonna talk about it, but he's only right 11 points. Is that my meathead math? He's only 11 points ahead of Award.
yeah. So now even third is, sort of
Questionable.
up. Yeah, questionable.
Mm-hmm.
And you figure Dixon's 49 points up
Yeah.
on Newgarden. So you kind of threw away second in the championship. I know he's finished the second like every single year. I know it's not true, but
Yeah.
um, and now you throw away second, in my opinion, and now you're being pressed for the third position with Award right there, and you got McLaughlin not far behind that, just another 3 points back of that. So
Yeah.
that tightened that whole race up for third in the championship.
Yeah. And in his post race, he looked like he has accepted it, right? This championship is lost. We're
He's
battling
done.
for second, but even then,
Yep.
right? I think he's looking ahead, just thinking, man, what do we have to do? And
I think for him, his mentality was all or nothing, right? It's is
yeah,
how he went into this season saying, I'm either going to win the championship or I'm not. Um, and he's definitely not going to win it. And he's going to lose out on second, I believe.
yeah. I think he's going to lose out on second for sure. I
Yeah.
think he has to cover off with Award as well. They haven't won. I think they're due for a win. It's quite possible they could win one of the they being Arrow McLaren, likelier to be Award out of that trio, but they could easily win this. And Penske isn't, I mean, look at how they were on the IMS road course.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a struggle for them. I think the next
Yeah,
two races
it
they
is.
really
It
have to
is.
be perfect. Newgarden has to be perfect, and there's nothing in this season that suggests he's going to be perfect.
Yeah. And it's
right?
his, yeah, yeah. You figure it's his fourth second place finish this year. So he's been second 4 times this year, and he's been on the podium 7 times. So he's been good. He's a really good driver, obviously. It's just that it just hasn't come through.
No, and when it's bad, it's super bad,
Yeah, for
right? There's no
sure.
in between. It's not Dixon, right? Pelot has an average finish of under, let's call it 4, and it's actually 3 something
Mm-hmm.
on the season. That's not Dixon. I didn't do the math, but I would tell you that Dixon's average finish is probably pretty close to double digits,
Mm-hmm.
right? 9 or 10 or higher. And that's with 4 wins.
Yeah.
So, that's got to get cleaned up. He finished second to Power last year with 1 win. To
I
what
know.
did he have? 4 or 5 wins last year?
Yeah, he had quite a few. A
Finished
lot.
second.
Most of any driver.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Dixon
second.
now has 2 wins, and Dixon is ahead of him. And
Mm-hmm.
Pelot has 4 wins, and he's miles up the road. That
He
because
is.
when you think consistency, you think most of the Chip Ganassi Racing, Erickson, Dixon, Pelot,
Flo has more
consistency
points this year than he did the year he won the championship.
without a doubt.
Yep.
He hung on to it
And
at the end because remember Dixon was making a good pull for it. Newgarden was making a good pull for it. I mean, it came down to the wire, but
mhm.
without a doubt. But he's been dominant and he's been super good in places he hasn't dominated.
Yeah. Yeah. His
Been
worst
really,
finish
really
is
good.
eighth all
Yeah.
season.
Um, Another championship in Newgarden's future at some point in the next, let's call it 3 years.
I don't think it's likely based on his driving and what he's been up to. It's hard for me to think that he could go to a consistent standpoint and win a championship just because I think this past race was very telling and
Mhm.
just how his season overall has been very telling. Like he's either first or he's down in the field somewhere
Yeah.
and sometimes taking himself out like he did. And so could he get it together for sure? He drives for Penske, they're a great organization, but at the end of the day, I don't know if that's his in his sort of that's his mentality, right? I just think it's either all or nothing for him. That's the way it's been.
Do you think his bus bro gets a championship before he does?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think Scotty Mack has shown a lot of promising skills and has come along and he's learned the ovals over the last few seasons. So yeah, definitely. I think there's a championship in his sort of in his future.
I think McLaughlin has the likelihood of being a more consistent driver than Newgarden does. Because I think Newgarden still, for whatever reason, is willing to throw away some of these decent finishes, like
Mm-hmm.
just trying to be overly aggressive. I don't know what that is. And maybe some of that's pit stand. Wouldn't you tell if you're Tim Cindric, wouldn't you tell Newgarden, hey, don't do anything silly here. It's DeFrancesco in front of you. He's got a pit in the next X laps or whatever, right? Right around safe fuel.
Yeah, I would it's like, yeah, let's ride it
Right?
out from here and see where we end up. We're gonna be in
Right.
on the podium. So let's
Yeah, yeah.
let's go
Let's see
with it.
how it pulls, right? Let's see
Yeah.
how it develops. So he had that bump with Pato Award. Fair, dirty. What do you think?
I think it's dirty, honestly. Like
Oh, you do?
I do. It doesn't he comes up and
You and
hits
I are at
award.
separate paths today.
Well, yeah, here's why I think it's dirty. You look at what he did down the front straight, right? And down the front straight, he's zigzagging all the way to pit lane, basically the
Yeah,
barrier between the track
yeah,
and
yeah.
pit lane. I didn't see any other driver do that. Not a
No,
single driver. So you're being
driving desperate.
super aggressive to hold on to that spot because you know it's either win or I'm out of the championship. It was all
Yeah,
or nothing for him. And so I
yep,
feel my humble opinion is that it's a dirty move. Like you don't go up and bump at almost 200 miles an hour before the entry to turn three.
yeah. I didn't have a problem with it. And it's probably because the problem I had with it was it's just ill advised, right? With everything you have going on, is that worth, right, doing that and taking both of you out and throwing away throwing away the points? I mean, that's how I look at it. The aggressiveness of it, you're racing the wrong guy. if you think he's going to yield at all. I mean, you're talking about the guy who put Scott Dixon in the wall at Long Beach and was like
Mm-hmm.
indignant about it, right?
Yep.
So you're kind of you know who you're racing, and he's not going to give an inch.
Yep.
And I mean, in the same thing in the papaya car, it's you're racing a guy who's clinging to a championship. I'm sure the guy in the
Mm-hmm.
papaya car is like, I'm clinging to second, just like you are,
Yeah.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's ill advised because I feel like Newgarden is in the position of control there because he's better seated in the championship and he has more to lose at that point
Yeah.
in this
I
in
think the
this
whole
championship
like
fight.
sweeping the ovals got to his head. I think all of that just kind of came the culmination of I'm in the championship hunt. I need to win to keep this streak alive for the season. I'd be
Yeah,
the only IndyCar driver ever to win all the ovals in a single season, except obviously when it was only one oval. But so you've got that in your mindset, and you're just like, I'm out to win, and I'm gonna do anything to win. So from my perspective, it's almost like you're willing to risk everything
yeah,
and do some questionable moves in order to make that happen.
yeah, yeah. I
And it caught him out at the end of the day, as you mentioned, going and trying to get around Devlin, and you put it in the marbles, and off you go in the wall, and that's it.
yeah. Scotty Mack finishes fifth, ninth place for Will Power. The producer's question: will we see the old Will in years to come? What does that mean?
I just feel like Will's like been back behind the other two drivers, hasn't been, as aggressive as he normally is. And it's not, you come to every street course or road course, and it's like Will is there for the pole. And I haven't seen it. And so the question becomes, is the Will of old going to come around? I know he won the championship last year, but it was in not Will fashion. And so
Right.
you just wonder what's going on there. He's signed an extension to his deal, which is great, and Verizon's sticking around, which is the only reason we have Verizon cell service, by the way. And so I just wonder as I'm typing, like I
Yeah.
always expect more out of Will, like race in, race out, and we just I haven't seen that fire and that go get him sort of and
I,
that domination he had. I just don't see
yeah.
it.
I don't know that we will. He's 9 points behind Erickson for sixth place
No, he's not
right now.
terrible, but it's not.
Right. But I think that's what Will is okay with, right? Like I think he's okay with let's run a smart race. Let's get everything that we can possibly get. There's no sense in being a dum dum, right? And throwing it away. And I don't think that Will has that dum dum fire anymore. He without a doubt has the best interviews of anybody there, and that includes Ray Hall, who I think a lot of the podcast people think, oh, Ray Hall's always telling it like it. Willpower tells it like it is, right? I think sometimes Graham's got an agenda with some of the things that he talks about, but Will tells it like it is, and I think there's no doubt about that. So that's how I look at it. Are we going to see Will of old? Nope, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't
I
think
really
so
don't.
either. That's
But
why
I
I asked the
think this
question. I'm not saying
Willpower
who he is
2.0
today
is
is
the
a
guy
bad
that
thing.
you
I
want to
just
be.
I
Yeah,
just miss the days of him just
I know you
pulling
do.
away on courses, and he checks out, and everybody's like, "Well, it's another willpower day, right?" And we haven't
Yeah,
seen that.
yeah. The aero cars seem pretty fast, hooked up, well balanced. Pato
Yeah.
Award comes in second place. He wasn't happy with it. Happy, but not happy with it, right? Like, another second place. He's kind of, not thrilled with how that works
Yeah.
out. Led 18 laps, which I think is an accomplishment given what, Newgarden and Dixon did. Um, at the end of the day, the strategy didn't work. I think part of that could be the Chevy versus Honda. You know,
Yeah, I think part of it
who
is,
knows
yeah, for sure.
where
Yeah.
he would have been if I'll give you two scenarios. Okay. Where Award would have been if Newgarden would have still been on track and if Malukas wouldn't have been battling McLaughlin as hard as he was.
Hmm. Well, you figure he got in front of Newgarden
Right.
at one point during a pit
Yeah.
strategy. So,
But he had to stay
uh,
there.
yeah, that's true. And then I think this is where the Newgarden no, oh, I got to get through the field kind of comes up, and I'm, down in third place, whatever it is. And so yeah, I'm kind of curious where he ends up as well. But I figured he had enough pace. He was pretty racy. He battled a lot of people, and so I don't think it was I think he would have been in the same position even if Newgarden would have, just kept it off the wall. So
You think Award would have still beat Newgarden
I
for
think
second
so.
place?
I
Hmm.
think so. I think that's the thing that was like the straw that broke the camel's back with Newgarden is like I lost this on a pitch strategy sort of sequence, and now
So he
it's
just lost his mind and went out there and just tried to get it all back and
yeah,
beat
he's
one
just trying to get
corner.
it
Yeah.
back. That's my opinion.
Maybe.
That's what I
Yeah.
saw.
Uh, it's his fourth second place finish this year. He's been on the podium 7 times. I, you know, no wins, but I don't think that's a bad season.
No,
Um, Interesting note though, you pulled this thing up. I had no idea his career path to Arrow McLaren. He was an Andretti Autosport Indy Lights driver,
he sure was
right?
in 2018.
Yeah, drove in Indy Lights, won 9 events, was on the podium in all but 4 events, and 2 of those he finished fourth, winning the championship. He went to Carlin Racing, which we know that was short lived. I don't even remember him being in the Carlin car. And then Arrow in 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one race for Harding in 2018.
Yeah,
How is
sure
it that he
did.
bounced around like that after leaving Andretti that nobody scooped him up?
I don't know. That's the weirdest thing.
Or
I
that
was
Andretti
just
didn't drag him back? Because Andretti doesn't
yeah.
seem to mind having these young guns that could be a little wrecky, right, to begin with. I don't, how they let him go or, you know,
What
what they,
happened back then? I have no
yeah,
idea, but I was just looking at that and I'm like, this is very interesting that he's with Arrow and has been with Arrow for the last uh, several seasons since 2020. So, but how does he go to Harding Racing for one event, right? He was at the race finale and raced, and then Carlin for part of the season, and then was not around. I don't know what happened there. And then you go over to Errol McLaren, and it's where you land. So
yeah,
I saw it. I was very surprised. I don't know if anybody
yeah.
knows. If they know, let us know what happened there.
It's good stuff, though. That's good stuff. It's a bit of a head scratcher how Andretti did that. Because let's face it, Arrow McLaren's not letting him go anywhere.
Mm-mm, not a
He was unhappy
chance.
last year, and they gave him a raise and new contract and everything else. So
Yeah,
they're not letting him go anywhere.
yeah,
Dave Malukas, third place, finished on the podium, one spot lower than last year. Had a good tussle with McLaughlin at one point. Before we get into the rest of that, Mc, McLaughlin and Malukas, they bumped too.
they
Fair,
did.
dirty.
That one looked fair to me.
Did that look fair?
I think it did. Yeah, that one looked a little more fair than coming up and just hitting somebody.
So I'll say that I'll agree with you. I think it's fair. I'll say that it's ill advised, but for different reasons than what I said for Newgarden. For Malukas, he's had a miserable season. He's already announced that
Hmm.
he's leaving. He has offers. I think we're going to hear something about Malukas pretty soon. Um, but you still have, until Penn is on paper, and by all accounts, it's not.
Hmm.
You're still auditioning for your next job.
Yeah. So play it
So
cool.
you can be aggressive, right? That
Hmm.
can turn heads and make people, you know, stand up and take notice. But you can be aggressive and be a dum dum too, and make people
Hmm.
notice, but in a different way. And I think that's for me where it was. I don't think it was a dum dum in it, but it was to me just ill advised,
Well,
right? Just ill
I think
advised.
if you had that bad of a season, you're up there and you're racing against Scott. You want to
Yeah,
show your muscle, right? You show what you can do, and so at some point you take a little bit of chance. And if it ends up rubbing, which it did, but they got away with it, luckily, and he went on to finish third. So you get a podium finish, which is awesome. He gets to stand next to Scott Dixon, who is one of his heroes, is my understanding, and gets
sure.
to pour champagne down his shirt or whatever the bubbly is.
Yeah.
So that was something to see too. So who knows where he's going to be? But to your point, you are auditioning every time you're out, no matter what you're
Mhm.
doing, and even if you're have a bad car and you're holding up people, you're auditioning at that point, right? You need to let people go by. So
Yeah.
I
Second
saw
place
that.
last year, third place this year. Sometimes you have a knack. Maybe he's got a knack because let's face it, because Coin's been not great this season. I'm
Yeah, I
being
know.
kind, right?
I
You
know.
want to beat your teammate first, and Stingray Rob. managed to bring it home in 21st,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Lucas was on the pole.
I don't think it's the team that did anything different than they've been doing. I think for some reason this track suits David Malukas really well, and he's able to
Yep.
get the most out of the car, whether the car's good or bad, or he's got great feedback, or I'm sure they rolled off with the same setup, but at the end of the day, things change. You have this new tire compound that, I don't think played a whole lot in the race at all. I don't think that compound was far off of the actual compound, the hard tire compound. So
No.
I think it was sort of this, let's sort of figure it out. But I don't know if that changes your setup. I don't think it did for any of these drivers, because you had to run one set for 2 laps, whether it was green or yellow.
Yeah. Andretti Autosport, maybe not the most ideal weekend. I heard it had a decent run to sixth place, but otherwise, I mean, the balance of the team with Grosjean 12th, Kirkwood 15th, he was able to unlap himself. And Devlin 19th, the very in demand free agent Devlin DeFrancesco 19th. With other notables being Rinus VK finishing 11th, Santino Ferrucci finishing 13th after starting 26th. That's about all I got there.
You don't have anything else?
Nope.
Well, I think there's one more part of the notes here. Daly
Oh,
finished 16th, which is better than both of his teammates. Lundgaard finishing 17th, Graham finishing 20th. I'm just wondering what happened. Like, how does this happen that Daly comes in and finishes better than both of his teammates? Dead air
well said.
silence on the podcast. So I was just very surprised when I was looking through the standings and how that sort of played out. I don't know if Harvey, who's in my opinion, I think should still be in there. I don't think he's would he have finished higher than his teammates? Who knows? But it was just a notable that I saw as I was looking through the results.
Yeah. Good observation. Let me ask you this: in your opinion, I'd be curious to see how the listeners feel about this one too. Did the alternate tire do anything to enhance this race?
I don't think so.
Me neither.
I've already stated I didn't think it
Yeah.
did anything.
Yeah.
They said it was a little quicker. It maybe didn't last as long, but I think drivers got 45 to 50 laps. I'd have to look to see who went the furthest on the Reds, but I don't think so. I think the compounds are too close. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I think if that's what led to all this marbling, I say you put that idea back on the shelf, because it once you get that much marble on the track, it's going to be processional, and then nobody's going to want to take a chance, and those that do take a chance are going to wind up in the wall. Sato,
Yeah.
Newgarden, right? McLaughlin got pushed up. We mentioned it by Malukas. He got pushed up, and it took him quite a bit to get his tires clean enough where he had confidence going back into the corners. So into the turns, I shouldn't say corners, but into the turns. But I don't think it did anything for the show. I don't, I have no interest in seeing that come back.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah.
Like, if there's a way to keep the marbles off the track, then maybe. But I think marbles were a big issue, and I don't.
Yeah.
I can't say it's all to the alternate tire, but at the end of the day, if it's softer, it's going to create more marbles. So it's just the way it works.
Yeah, I agree. You ready to walk the grid?
Yeah, let's walk the road. Let's do it, Dan.
The first story on this grid walk is the Herta throwback. Did you see that? Where Andretti
No.
Autosport on social media, they showed Colton Herta's car for Laguna is a tribute livery to
Oh, I
his
did see that. Yeah, I
dad's
guess I did see that.
shell car. What I mean, really a good looking car. It looks really good. It's about as close to that Reynard with the shell livery as you're gonna get, which begs the question, Tim. Should IndyCar, like NASCAR, have those throwback weekends?
I think so. It's always good to have a little spice in there and to bring it back, as long as your sponsors can make it sort of work. It's not like NASCAR, we had the same sponsors for 20 plus years, right? They kind of come in and come out and so on and so forth. But I like it. I don't know if it has anything to do with, we saw that Colton bought his dad the shell car, the one that he won at Laguna. I don't know if it was, I think it was the first one. And so we saw that sort of video, and maybe they played into that, but it's always good to see. And if you can recreate it, why not?
Yeah.
It's just too bad that the older one looks better than the newer one.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole thing does.
That's what I
I
mean.
think it'd be tricky to bring back some of the tobacco sponsorship, because the red and white Penske cars are very iconic, and
Yeah.
there's really no way of, I think, masking what that branding is. But there's some liveries I'd like to see. I mean,
Do it
right,
with
the Team Cool
Verizon. Come
Green
on now.
cars, right? I mean, I'd like to see something come back, the silver Verizon, or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, I'd like to see some of those come back because I think
So
I
you're
think
on board
some
with
of those
this
cars
one.
are pretty
You're
good.
on board with bringing
Totally.
old liveries
Hmm.
back.
Yep. Let's do it at Milwaukee because why not? Everybody's clamoring
That
for
would
Milwaukee.
be outstanding. It would be like
And you're
old
gonna
times.
make me go to Milwaukee to see that race because you said if they brought it back, we're going. So,
Yeah, I did, didn't I? But
yep,
I never said that. But okay.
you
We're
did.
gonna go.
It's out there. I said
Okay.
if they bring it, we're going.
All right.
All right, let me go back to Tim's actual first grade walk
I
course.
was like, where's he going with this?
Jack Harvey out at Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan Racing. Connor Daly in for this one race. You want my thoughts? Here are my
Do
thoughts.
you, yeah. And
I,
I
I'm
want your thoughts if Harvey's going to land somewhere next year. I think that's the thing
yeah.
that's really, I sort of know your thoughts on the overall thing, but go ahead.
Don't let me forget to come back to that because I didn't address that. Quote: As I tell everybody, Jack's our guy. I really feel bad for the guy. He can't buy good luck. We know he can drive the car. I'll just say this: I don't see things changing at this stage.
Bobby
October
Rahal,
15th, 2023, Robert Woodward Rahal.
better known as Bobby.
Mm-hmm. And then over the last week, after that went away, and Jack was replaced by Connor Daly, I kept hearing a bunch of people podcasts and whatever else talking about. Oh, it makes sense. Connor's good there. Connor's always run good there. Has he? Connor in 2022 finished 23rd, one spot ahead of Jack. 11th place in 2021. Jack Harvey 10th. You have to go back to race 2 in 2020 before you see Connor outperform Jack. Connor 8th, Jack 13th for Meyer-Shank Racing. But Connor was good there. Connor's always been good there. So I guess it makes sense that they would put Connor in that car. Doesn't make any damn sense to me, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm a fan, right? Not an insider.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So we have breaking news along the same front for this same car. Yuri Vips will be in this car for Portland. Tim, is he in there for the balance of the season, Portland and Laguna, or
Yeah.
is it just for Portland?
It's for the
So
balance of the season.
yeah, Yuri Vips. He'll be in the car through the balance of the season. We got more, quotes from Bobby Rahal to talk about there, and of course Yuri Vips, who is super happy, and
Yep.
we'll see how that works out. The only thing I'll say is this: I'm not going to make this a political statement. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on this thing, and I'll let you look it up. And I'm just going to make a quick narrative here. So, speaking of the narrative, Vips doesn't exactly have the best narrative in his
Mm-mm.
in his path from being a Red Bull Junior driver in Formula One, right, with a path to
Yeah.
Formula One, to finding himself in substitution for Jack Harvey. I will admit this, and I will be the first one to tell you this because this is a G-rated show, and it takes everything I have, all my entire being, to keep this a G-rated show. People make mistakes and people say dumb things, and I'll be the first one to tell you that. And I think people have moments, right? And I think with proper contrition, I think everybody deserves a second chance. But character-wise, who's worse, right? Or what are we looking at future-wise? This guy, Yuri Vips, or Santino Ferrucci, who continues to be a pariah in the paddock? And based on what I see, what Ferrucci did was just poor emotional intelligence and immaturity.
Mm-hmm.
What's the other one? Not for me to say. Try not to judge that myself. But that's what I'll tell you.
Yeah, there's been a lot of backlash on Twitter with this announcement.
And I'll tell you, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and that's all you can do. We'll see what he
Yep.
does and see how he matures and see what he does in the last two races. And obviously it's a decision that the team has to make and sponsors have to make.
Yep. Tom Blomqvist will run the final two IndyCar races at Portland and Laguna in the number 60 Auto Nation in as he continues to pinch hit for Simon Pagenaud, who obviously this means Simon's hanging it up through the balance of the season. He continues to have post concussion syndrome or effects,
Yeah.
and that was on Simon's own Twitter announcement. Obviously, want to see him back into a race car, whatever it may be, in IndyCar or in sports cars, whatever it is. I like Simon Pagenaud. I think he's a good champion. I think, this season, obviously, in his time at Meyer Shank didn't go where we think it could have. I had
Yeah.
Pagenaud finishing 10th in this championship. I don't know that you had him
And he
as high as
misses
I
8
did.
races, right? He
Yeah.
misses
Yep.
8 races after that accident. It was violent. No no sudden stops, right? Obviously you're
Right.
rolling and barrel rolling, which is a lot of head movement back and forth. So yeah, we just wish him well, but obviously he's not
Yeah.
gonna be back in the car, and that's the end of it for him, at least
Right.
this season.
Marcus Ericsson will be leaving Chip Ganassi Racing at long last. It's been confirmed that he'll be taking his services to Andretti Autosport. We all know he wanted to be a pay driver, and discussions with Chip didn't go maybe as fruitful as Ericsson had hoped, and Michael was willing to scoop him up. I'll tell you, we don't know yet what number or sponsorship this is going to be. I think this is a decent move. I think this is a decent move for both organizations. What about you?
The only reason I think it's a good move is they both want each other, right? Like
Yeah.
someone wants to get paid, someone wants to bring him on. Is it going to be a force to be reckoned with? I don't think so. Um, just based on, I think you've been in the best car on the grid for the years you've been in IndyCar. I think Chip Ganassi has been top of its game. So you're
Yeah.
moving to a team that isn't on top of their game and still gets talked about whether they are third or fourth best team, whatever it
Yeah.
might be. So I, I don't know what comes of it. I think he's gonna race well. He races well, but I don't think it's going to be any sort of dominance that you see out of Polo or, even what Award can do with an aero car. I don't think you're going to see that out of him. I think
Yeah.
so. I think I saw a question: does Ericsson get a win next year? Dan, you think he gets a win?
I do. I do.
Oh, wow.
Here's the thing: whether he's replacing Devlin or he's replacing Grosjean, and we don't know either one, right? Well, we did. I mean, we know that Devlin's going away. It hasn't been confirmed that Grosjean's leaving yet. But either way, whoever he's replacing there, he's an elevated presence there. He's going to be more consistent. He's going to be more level-headed. He's going to be able to bring that car home in ninth place if that's what it is. And that's kind of been Grosjean's problem in the first part of this year, where he was trying a little too hard to overcompensate for a car that just wasn't there for him.
Mm-hmm.
So Ericsson's not going to do that, and I'm certain he's great with the sponsors. I'm sure, he's an Indy 500 champion. So I think it does help that game. Are they going to put 3 cars in the top 10 in championship next year with, Herta and Ericsson and Kirkwood? I'll tell you what, this is a 180-degree turn for me. I almost feel like it's more likely you'll see Ericsson. I can't believe I'm going to say this. Ericsson and Kirkwood in the top 10 at the end of the year next year. And Herta, to me, is kind of maybe.
Can't believe you're saying that either.
Yeah. Is kind of likely, but is what I'll say about Colton Herta.
Well, he was the best driver at Andretti Autosport this past weekend, and he can show speed and he can fight for poles. So I don't know if that's the case, but I'm I'm the opposite. I'm thinking Ericsson doesn't win next year. I think he's going to do well, but I don't think it's going to be to the level that he's been at Chip Ganassi, and I think it's just due to what's underneath him. And and what Andretti can give versus what Chip Ganassi can give a driver.
Yeah. Um, Tim, do you know who's in demand? Free agent is in demand next year?
I almost fell on my seat.
Devlin D. Francesco.
Yeah, high
Why do you
demand
suppose
after
that
the
is?
NGGP performance.
At one corner
One corner. And then like
against a 2-season body of work.
that
And it
felt
could
like a
be
lead
the
balloon.
commercial support, right?
Yeah,
My
that's the
kid
big
could be
deal.
in great demand in IndyCar if I were writing a $6 million check every year,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, it's yeah. I think the bottom line money talks in this situation, which
yep,
all teams are looking for somebody that has budget. Not all, but most teams are looking for a driver that has budget. And if they can bring budget and they can run a team and go out and give it the old
yep,
college try, I guess you do it. I don't know.
yeah. Um, and that's not to say anything about Devlin. When you see him on TV, I've seen him in the paddock at Road America. He seems like a very nice person,
Oh yeah.
super nice person, very, um, affable. I mean, just super, super friendly, nice person. But the results haven't been there, and the team is a reasonably good team, right? But he's so far off the other three drivers, kind of makes you wonder maybe he will do better in a smaller team where he can get a little bit more support and, a little bit more, support around him versus we're catering to Grosjean and we've got Herta and we're trying to get him to Formula One and we've got, Kirkwood who's back and, he's won everywhere and we expect him to do, you know, maybe if Devlin goes to a coin, we've seen Dale Coyne racing pull some rabbits out of the hat and maybe,
Yeah.
maybe Devlin can be that next rabbit. Aaron McLaren suing the driver that they thought they were going to have next year and the guy who's been wearing their shirt in reserve role, which drives you bananas. Um, on the Formula One side, 20 to 30 million in damages. McLaren is seeking against Alex Palou and his racing entity. Um, I don't know. it seems bizarre to me that 2 years in a row this is what we've got. I
Yeah.
love Chip's statement because I think it needed to be said. Right? I mean, they were the ones that interfered with a guy who was under contract. It sounds like that management team that I think helped spur some of this mess is gone, and Pelo's back with Roger Yasukawa, helping to guide the career, and I think that's going to help
Hmm.
put this thing back on a better path. Whether or not he ends up writing a check to McLaren, why McLaren would even write a check to somebody who, you know, is supposed to be
And
coming next year. Like, why would
yeah.
they advance him on 24? Something just doesn't smell right with that. To me, that just seems my bad. I think from a development standpoint on the F1 side, that's the game, dude. Right? That's the
Hmm.
game. He came in, he drove for you, did exactly what you want him to do. He's not going to drive with you in IndyCar. It doesn't mean he owes you all this money for two sides of that coin, because those were two very separate pieces. That's the
Hmm.
reason why he was allowed to stay with Chip Ganassi Racing, and Chip allowed him to continue in that reserve role with McLaren. Those were two very different circumstances, right? It was difficult for some of us to look at it separately, but at the end of the day, those were two separate entities, two separate deals. I
Yeah, they
don't know how
were,
you're
but
going
I
to use
think it
one to get
was
money back for the other. So,
yeah.
because
They were two separate deals, but at
yeah,
one time it was one deal. It was like you come over, drive some Indy cars, and then we'll get you over there
maybe. Yeah, but
until
that's the carrot that they can dangle. They're the only ones that
yeah,
can.
yeah.
But everything still has to come into place. He fulfilled his role on the F1 side. He drove in reserve. He drove, in free practice. He did what they wanted him to do. He's just not racing in your IndyCar team. Doesn't mean he can't continue in that role. So why would
Hmm.
why would there be damages there? Does that mean you're going to stop him being in that
Depends what's in the
role?
contract. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like, who knows? I think you had brought out something about NTT and what that means for them because they moved over, and what does
they
that
did.
mean? Are they
Yeah,
coming back to Ganassi? Are they staying there? Is Flo even driving for Ganassi next year? I don't think that's even been finalized. No one's ever
I think
said
he will
that.
be. Yeah, they haven't, but yeah, I think he will. So
Unless there's an F1 opportunity that's out there. I don't, you never know.
Yeah. AlphaTauri or Williams or
Yeah, you never
something, right?
either.
Yeah.
He could be going over there. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Championship standings, really of substance. Dixon now solidly in second place, 49 points ahead of Newgarden. That's tall, Tim. Award up another spot to fourth and only 11 points behind Newgarden for third. Rossi up to ninth. Herta back in the top 10, which means Cal Kirkwood's out, sitting in 11th. But I think that'll continue to go back and forth just depending on how those two finish, right? I
Yeah,
think
it's pretty close back there,
it's
right?
going to be a
It's
basketball match, right? We're just going to keep going back and forth until the game's over.
yeah, yeah.
Pelo's up 74 points. I don't think it's likely anybody's going to catch him. You have noted here his worst finish on the year is 8th place.
Yeah.
They gotta outscore him by 37 points a race,
It's just not going
right?
to
Over the
happen.
next two races.
It's that consistent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something catastrophic has to happen, which I don't see that
And
going
the
on. I
guy
don't think anybody
chasing
does.
him is in equal equipment,
Yeah, it's team. Yeah, for sure.
right? So it's not like it's Pelot and Award or Pelot and, it was Newgarden right behind him,
Mm-hmm.
where that's kind of the variable, right? It's a different team. It's a different engine. It's a different, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same. It's the guy on your team. So you
Mm-hmm.
just have to be just as good as him. You don't even have to beat him. You have to be you have to be in the area of his finish
Yeah, you'd have
because
to look
he has
at
to blow
like,
you away, and it's not going to happen,
yeah.
right? So, next up, bitnell.com Grand Prix of Portland, September 3rd. Is that Labor Day? That is Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, it is. It's next
Three,
weekend.
3 o'clock
They got
Eastern time.
another 2 weeks in a row
Yeah.
racing.
Timmy, you got a pick? Pole, win, and dark horse?
Yeah, I think I do. I got Herta on pole. I've got Pelot winning this thing, and my dark horse would be I don't know if I can say it's a dark horse anymore, but Lundgaard mixing it up in there.
I like it. We're back on track, Timmy. I have Lundgaard on pole. I have
Hmm.
Pelot winning this thing, and I can't believe I'm saying it, but I'm going to. Ray Hall as the dark horse.
Oh wow. After
Mm-hmm.
his last performance at the IMS road course, you think there's still some magic within that vehicle
Oh,
to get there?
yeah, I do. I do. And what I didn't say, because I didn't say anything loving about Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan today, but I will say this: I loved the Hogan.
I
Livery.
noticed that you were about
Yeah,
that. Yeah, that brings back
it was Ray Hall Hogan Racing, right?
it's nostalgia. It's
Yeah,
yeah, it's going back. So
it
that's
was
the whole
Ray
reason
Hall
you want
Hogan
the
Racing when they were
liveries.
trying to bail out Team Penske in the 1995 Indy
Oh yeah,
500, right?
for
So
sure. Trying to get them on the in the field.
yeah.
You don't have Spencer's pick, so
I
no.
don't. I forgot to text Spence, but he'll pop it into the YouTube comments as usual. So my
Yeah.
apologies. A long
I
day today.
I got one more thing. I know
Mhm.
where it's not in the notes. So where does Jack end up next year? We got away from that. Do
I
you have
don't
a
know. I really
yeah,
don't.
okay.
I'm fearful because I think there's a lot of young guys in the F1 ladder system that are looking seriously to come here, and I think some of those guys have budget.
Hmm.
And I think that the teams that were already kind of had a head start and looking at who's available out there had a head start. And it's been, I think probably been the worst, right? The worst kept secret that Jack was going to be out of contract with Ray Hall at the end of the season.
Yeah.
So, anybody who's considering him, I think would have already considered him by now. And I haven't heard his name anywhere. And I mean, again, we're not insiders, so we see what we see, and that's about it. We'll see what happens there. The idea of a reunion with Shank, I think we know that's off the table. If
Hmm.
somebody buys Ilott out of his contract with Juncos, maybe that's something. But I think Juncos has got some budget situation right now. Um, ECR and Renus VK also has a buyout too, and I've heard his name being mentioned as somebody who could possibly be bought out of his contract.
Yeah.
So maybe that because I don't see Ed Carpenter putting a true rookie in his cars. I think he wants somebody who's got some seasoning, right? And
Hmm.
Jack would definitely fit that bill. And who knows what would happen there in that car. And I'd love to see. I want to see him get a chance somewhere else because I think he was on a good path when he left Shank, and then he just ran into a situation where Rahal was lost. And now that they're found, right? Allegedly, they're found, and Jack was still way behind in the
Hmm.
development there. And I think they just decided to make a move
Hmm.
and move early,
Well, I had
which
to
I
ask.
don't
I had to
understand.
ask. You
Yeah.
got the shirt on, so I had to ask the question.
Yep.
You were a diehard supporter, for sure.
Diehard supporter.
Yep.
I have been a Ray Hall fan for 30 years, Tim, right?
Behind Penske, but just to be clear,
Right.
so everybody
But
knows.
right. But I mean, those were the two teams that I rooted for all the time. They were the Philip Morris team as far as I'm concerned, right? Because one had Marlboro sponsorship, the other one was Miller sponsorship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were, both under the Philip Morris umbrella at that time. But um I I was a fan of both of them, and I was a huge fan of Bobby Rahal and Max Pappas when he went there, and Brian Herta when he was there in the shell car, and
Hmm.
Kenny Brack, in the shell car, in the yellow shell car. I was a big
Yeah.
fan there. So yeah,
Yeah.
this kind of bumps me out. I don't like stuff like this. I think
Yep.
it's crap. I really do.
Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see how the cards fall. Hopefully, he lands
Yep.
somewhere.
We'll see what happens to the guy whose name's on the building too, because as far as we know, Graham has not signed anything.
Mm, that is true. He may be stepping out.
Yep. So that's all I got, Tim.
Same here. It's
Good to
been
see you.
fun. Yeah,
Freshly
it's good.
shaved from
Yeah, had some
neck
meetings
to
today.
neck.
had some had some meetings today, so
There you go.
I had to get cleaned up. So
I've been camping all weekend. I haven't shaved in days. So,
you look the same.
no, I know. I'm an old man, old and infirm.
We're all old.
So,
Too funny.
all right. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you after Portland. Stick
Yep.
around.
Take care.